Watch how a Reform MP delivers a deeply emotional challenge over the struggles facing boys and young men in Britain. His speech questions whether Westminster is doing enough to address education, employment, family breakdown, mental well-being, and the lack of positive role models. His message quickly turns into a powerful parliamentary confrontation. Before we continue, hit like and subscribe to Britain Daily for more explosive political coverage. Let's watch this explosive clip.
Thank you, Mr. Twigg. It's indeed a pleasure to serve under your chair in a very important debate. So I guess the question is, do we need a minister for men and boys? But we already have a minister for women. In fact, we have a select committee for women and equalities. But what about men? What about men and boys? What about young boys? What about white working class young boys? These boys, these young men, have historically been very useful to our society, especially when we needed coal mining, or we needed to have our steel made in the mills in the north, or we need factories to be filled with labourers to do back-breaking hard work. And young men and boys were also very, very useful when it came to fighting wars. Young men and boys dragged away from their towns and villages to be killed on a foreign battlefield. Even now we send young lads to foreign fields, and they come back, some of them do, without limbs, legs missing, arms missing. Even worse, some come back in a coffin. And we all say what a great young man he was. What a lot of great friends he had. He was a comrade, he was brave, all this. And then a few days we forget about him. And we leave the family to pick up the pieces and live a lifetime of grief. Meanwhile, the lawmakers at this place, some idiotic lawmakers sometimes in this place, haven't got a clue about what young men and boys are going through. Instead, they talk about white privilege. And they tell boys that they need to go on courses, not to be misogynistic. It's absolutely shameful. That's right, we take all the opportunities away from young men and boys and then tell them they are to blame for the way women are treated in this country. It's nonsense. The CSJ tells us that boys and men are increasingly falling behind in education, employment and social well-being. But who's to blame for all this? I think this place here is to blame for all this. I truly do. We have produced a benefit system that doesn't encourage the family unit anymore. You know, sometimes it's more profitable to be a single parent at home. Mainly women, if we're honest. And a lot of these women are left to bring up boys on their own with no male role model in the house. It's absolutely shocking. Is it any wonder that our young men are confused and don't have any direction? In fact, some of the only interactions these young men do have is with the local bobby when they've been in trouble on the street. It's different for me in my day. I grew up listening to my dad's alarm clock going off every morning, 5 o'clock. He'd get up and go and do a shift down the pit. And then a few years later, he'd get me up and I would go down the pit with my dad. He was my role model. And every single lad in our village had a role model because of the family unit. My dad was my role model, and like me, many other kids in the village, their dads were their role models. But this place, I strongly believe, has broken our society. And it never takes any responsibility. We have MPs in this place, including the Prime Minister. I won't have a go now. They tell young boys they must watch BBC programmes like Adolescence because of the way women are treated. We're blaming young boys for the way women are treated. I would say, yes, let them watch this programme, but make girls watch it as well. As a society, we should all be watching these things. So I say, yes, we do need a minister for young men and boys to put right the wrongs created in this place. And maybe this place has created a society where young people are failing, and we have the cheek to sit here scratching our heads wondering how we can put it right. But I go back, it's the family unit that's caused this problem. It's the lack of family male role models. We have to decide, do we want the state to provide role models for children, or do we want the family and friends and neighbours and schools to provide the male role models? I think it should be the family. Thank you, Mr. Twigg.
What we have just witnessed was a speech that went far beyond a conventional political argument. It raised a question that can be uncomfortable to discuss in modern Britain. Are we doing enough to support boys and young men who are falling behind? The Reform MP began by questioning whether Britain needs a dedicated minister focused specifically on men and boys. His argument was that while there are established structures focused on women and equality, the problems facing boys and young men can sometimes receive far less political attention. He pointed to concerns surrounding education, employment and social well-being, particularly among disadvantaged young men. His wider argument was that if politicians want to understand why some young men are struggling, they need to look beyond statistics and examine what is happening inside families, communities, schools and workplaces. One of the most emotional parts of the speech was his discussion of young men who serve in the armed forces. He spoke about those who are sent overseas, some returning with life-changing injuries and others never returning at all. His point was simple. Society often celebrates young men for their courage and sacrifice, but the families left behind can carry the consequences for decades. That led into his broader argument about the importance of male role models. He described his own experience growing up with a father who worked in the coal industry and became a role model for him. He argued that, in his view, many young people benefited historically from strong family and community structures where fathers, relatives, neighbours, teachers and other adults could provide guidance and direction. But his criticism did not stop there. The MP argued that politicians have sometimes responded to problems affecting boys by telling them what they should not be doing, rather than asking why some boys feel disconnected from education, employment and society in the first place. He specifically criticised the way discussions around sexism and misogyny can sometimes place responsibility primarily on boys. His argument was that conversations about social behaviour should involve everyone, not simply young men. That is where this debate becomes particularly important. There are millions of young people across Britain growing up in very different circumstances. Some have strong family support. Others may grow up without one or both parents actively involved in their lives. Some have inspirational teachers, coaches or community leaders. Others may have very few positive influences around them, and when young people lack direction, the consequences can extend far beyond the individual. Education can suffer, employment opportunities can disappear, mental well-being can deteriorate, crime and antisocial behaviour can become more likely, and communities can end up dealing with problems that politicians only confront after they have already become serious. The speech therefore raises a difficult question for Westminster. Should government be doing more specifically for boys and young men? Supporters of the argument would say that acknowledging problems facing young men does not mean ignoring women or girls. Instead, they would argue that a serious equality agenda should recognise disadvantage wherever it occurs. Critics, however, may question whether creating another ministerial position would actually solve these problems. They could argue that what young people need most is better education, stronger communities, employment opportunities, accessible mental health support and effective family services, not simply another government department. And perhaps that is the central issue. The debate should not simply be about political labels or which party can claim the moral high ground. It should be about whether young people are getting the support they need to build productive, stable and fulfilling lives. Because behind every statistic is a real person. A teenager struggling at school, a young man unable to find his first job, a father trying to provide for his family, a family dealing with separation, a young person searching for someone to look up to. These are not abstract political problems, they affect real households across Britain. The MP's speech clearly came from the belief that Parliament needs to pay greater attention to these challenges. Whether you agree with every part of his argument or not, he has raised an issue that deserves serious discussion. So now we want to hear from you. Do you think Westminster is doing enough to support boys and young men? Should Britain have a dedicated minister for men and boys, or would that simply create another layer of government without addressing the real causes of these problems? And what do you believe matters most? Stronger families, better schools, more employment opportunities, positive role models, or greater support for young people's mental well-being? Let us know your opinion in the comments. Keep the discussion respectful, because this is an issue that affects families across the country and deserves more than political shouting. If you found this debate interesting, please hit like, subscribe to Britain Daily, and turn on notifications for more powerful speeches, heated Commons debates, PMQs, and the biggest political stories from Westminster. Thanks for watching Britain Daily, and we'll see you in the next video.